Does your partner own a gun? Did you know that abusers with guns are 5 times more likely to murder their victims, their partners? Is the physical violence from your abusive relationship getting more frequent? And is the abuse getting more severe with each battering incident? Has your abusive partner threatened you with a weapon? Or have they threatened to kill you? These are just a few of the risk factors that have been identified which place all abuse victims at an increased risk of getting murdered by their abusive partners. We need to remember that this also happens with teens in dating relationships, the teens who are also at risk of getting murdered by an abusive partner. This is Truth and Heart Unfiltered with Pam Glenn. As many of you know, I'm a certified nurse midwife sharing important information about relationship abuse, as well as explaining each individual abuse behavior one post at a time. As a follow-up to my previous post, where we looked at the abuse behavior called fear and intimidation, this post will focus on all abuse victims' risk of getting murdered by an intimate abusive partner. This includes females, males, LGBTQ, as well as gender non-conforming victims. Now, the topics and the content in this post does include topics of trauma, so if this is triggering for anyone, please feel free to just turn the video off, and as I always say, please take good care of yourself. Let's start with a few up-to-date statistics to give us a reality check. And I know that statistics can sometimes sound rather boring, but I think these are going to be eye-opening for you. I'm going to start with the topic of femicide, which stands for the murder of women. And the concepts, however, can be applied to all abuse victims. Now, despite general homicide rates decreasing across the country, the femicide rates have been rising continuously over the last 2 decades. And separated and divorced women are most at risk of getting murdered by their abusive partner or their ex who happened to have been abusive, especially during the first 3 months after leaving their abuser. That is a super dangerous time. However, it's often been said that there remains a greater risk for those who choose to stay in their abusive relationships. Now, these victims of homicide or the victims of attempted homicide are often unaware of this dangerous risk to their lives by their abusers. I mentioned a study in my last post, and it's worth mentioning again. It was a small study that looked at 30 women who almost got murdered by their abusive partners, but they survived the attempt. And they studied these 30 women and found that 14 out of the 30, almost half of them, had no idea the dangerous risk that they were in, the dangerous situation they were in due to this risk of getting murdered by their abuser. Now, violence severity often escalates in these relationships, in these abusive relationships. Violence can escalate also during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. In fact, check out this statistic. Homicide has been reported as the leading cause of maternal mortality, with the majority perpetrated by a current or former intimate partner. This is from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. In other words, intimate partner homicide is the leading cause of maternal deaths, and maternal deaths is looking at deaths during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So intimate partner homicide is the leading cause of maternal deaths more than any obstetric or medical cause. Now, furthermore, 92% of female murder victims are killed by a man they knew, and 63% are killed by a husband, boyfriend, or ex who was abusive. Now let's take a moment and look at males. Males are increasingly experiencing more physical abuse by their intimate partner, and this includes an increased risk of getting murdered by an abusive partner. So in this country, the statistics show that nearly 3 to almost 5 women are killed by an intimate partner each day. For males, it's actually 2.9, so almost 3 men per day are killed by an intimate partner. And this is from the Bureau of Justice Statistics from 2022, so very recent statistics. Now let's take a look at a few other groups for a moment. Trans women and women of color also face higher risks of getting murdered by an abusive partner. Black women are 3 times more likely to be murdered by an intimate partner. American Indian and Alaskan Native women are 4 times likely than white women to be shot by an intimate partner. And more than 4 in 10 Latina homicides are committed by an intimate partner. Now again, we're seeing the increased risk of physical abuse and murder with teens in dating relationships. I'm going to be talking about this more. In fact, I plan a specific post in the future that looks at teen dating abuse, so please watch for that. So to summarize, this risk of getting murdered by an intimate abusive partner exists, no matter who you are, no matter what your background, your age, or your type of relationship. Now, there's something called the cycle of abuse, which focuses more on those relationships which are physically abusive. So bear with me for a minute. I have a very rough drawing to depict the cycle of abuse. And this is a drawing that I've often drawn out for my patients in the clinic setting, just to show them the situation that they're truly in. So this cycle of abuse consists of 3 phases. First, the tension building phase. I have a T for tension building. And women, people who are in abusive situations, people from all different backgrounds, get very good at picking up the tension in their abuser because they know what's coming next. The tension building phase is followed by the abusive incident, the battering incident, the getting beat up incident. This is often followed by the remorse or honeymoon phase, we call it. This is where the abuser apologizes profusely. They might say, I'm so sorry this happened. This will never happen again. They might even give lavish gifts to their victim, to their partner who experienced this horrendous abuse situation. But here's the problem, as I explain to my patients, and I want to make clear to all of you. People who choose to stay in these relationships are putting themselves at increased risk because this cycle often becomes more frequent with time, and the abuse gets more severe with each battering incident. The other thing that happens with those who choose to stay in these relationships is that oftentimes the remorse or honeymoon phase gets eliminated. So then the victims experience the tension building phase to the battering, back and forth, tension building, battering, and not even the honeymoon or remorse phase remains. So it goes back and forth. All right. Now, I would encourage, as I have with my patients, if you're wondering if you're in a situation like this, it's often helpful to take a calendar and use it to document abuse incidents. So you might want to put a little star on the calendar date when an abuse incident happens, maybe even the time of day if it's happening more than once in a day. You may want to also rate it. How severe is it on a scale of 1 to 10? This can show you, black and white on paper with pen, that the abuse is more than likely getting more frequent and more severe with time. And as a result, it's much more dangerous. So that's a tool that you can all use as well. So let's say you do realize that you're in an abusive situation and you realize you're in a situation of danger. What are some other things that you can do? Number 1, as I've said in every post, and it's in each write-up of my posts, is connect with the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. There's an advocate available for you 24/7 who can help you with your situation. And it's best to talk with them directly. They might even connect you in person with a local advocate so you can meet with them one-on-one as well. Now, the other thing that's so important is developing a safety plan. As I've mentioned in my previous post, my 7th post looked at the process of leaving an abuser, and I talked about the safety plan a bit there. But let's review it just for a moment here. So the safety plan helps victims to stay safe during that dangerous time when they're trying to leave their abuser, as well as the few months afterwards. And it's most important that the safety plan be done directly with an advocate, either directly on the phone or one-on-one in person. That's the most effective. Now, for those who are in situations where they're not able to connect directly, There is also on the National Domestic Violence Hotline website an actual safety plan that you can go through online as well. But make sure you clear your computer history so your abuser does not find that you've been working on this safety plan. So the safety plan can include things like an emergency kit, documents, copies of house keys, for example, keys to the safe, money, various essential items. It's important to make copies of these documents, and if possible, get all this digital evidence sent to a friend as a backup plan. Part of the safety plan is planning a safe place to go to, as well as a signal to children or the neighbors to call 911 if another abusive incident is happening. So there's many items to get in place before leaving an abuser so as to keep the victim safe. Now, along with the safety plan, victims can also do the following. They can document the abuse. They may document injuries by visiting a medical clinic. Some of my patients who were in abusive situations often wanted to find a way where they could come back and see me to talk this through again in more detail, and just as they were processing it all. So I used to tell them, hey, make up any kind of symptom that you're experiencing, maybe symptoms of vaginitis or urinary tract infection, whatever the case might be. Get on my schedule and we'll spend that time talking about your situation and trying to get you somewhere safe. And also, it's important that victims know to clear their phone numbers if they can from their cell phones, because oftentimes abusers, and I had this happen with one of my patients, their abuser came home from work and the first thing that they would do is check their partner's phone to see who they called while they were gone. That's how it can play out. Now, victims can also create a stalking log and document the stalking incidents. They can, again, have a personal diary or a calendar documenting the abuse incidents in real time and even rating them, as I mentioned as well. The victim can take pictures of injuries, pictures of items that their abuser maybe broke, pictures of maybe the household in disarray after a violent episode. All this can be important documentation for when a police report gets filed. Another photograph might be of the weapon that the abuser used in a threatening way towards their partner. Another tip is to let the abuser's call go to voicemail, because then you have a digital documentation of possible threats by the abuser, and this can help the police when they're also checking out this situation. It's important to save police reports as well. There's also a link called Love is Respect and a tool on that link called Who's Spying on Your Computer. So this will be included in the write-up of this post so that victims can check and see if their abuser is also following up and checking on them, checking to see what computer sites they're checking out. Now, there may be witnesses to the abuse incidents, and victims are going to want to keep a list of the witness names as well as their phone numbers. So those are just some tips to get people started. But all this and more can be done with the help of an advocate who helps victims develop a very comprehensive safety plan. That's so important. So I hope this discussion looking at the murder risk for abuse victims has been helpful. And for those in abuse situations, I cannot emphasize enough how dangerous these situations can be. Thank you so much for your time today. I encourage you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, to add comments to this post, and to share this link with others. Take care and stay safe.